This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
And welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And this is going to be the follow-up to our Strange Light Anomaly shows. And I am joined by Wren Collier.
Hey, everyone.
Timothy Renner.
Happy to be back.
And a stranger known as Joshua Cutchin.
I have returned from the netherworld of New Orleans.
And Josh was not able to make our first talk about these anomalous lights and had a lot that he wanted to talk about. And I have a few pages worth of comments, emails, and such from people who have had weird experiences. And I just said lights, and my entire area just lit up with a lightning bolt.
Wow.
Well, I can hear the thunder in the background, too. Well done.
Wow, that was not expected.
I got a handful of emails on that show, too. I guess people who listen to both of our shows, which I did not print out, but it was a good response all around.
Yeah. And I think it's a subject that people really haven't dealt with. So it was an opening for people to talk about their odd experiences. And I'm going to start with one, and then we're just going to kind of see where it goes from there. This one from Natalie Turner-Jones, who's a Patreon. And she said that her first experience happened when she was around 13 or 14 on Halloween. Before there were any questions about this, no, it definitely was not a jack-o'-lantern or glow stick or a prank. It was back in the 80s, and my family's property was located deep in the woods where there weren't very many houses. My father used to drive us in his pickup truck to go around trick-or-treating with our friends. On our way home that night, I remember looking out into the woods near our house, and there was this very strange green ball of light that was near the ground, but not on the ground. I recall that my father stopped the truck, and we all, my dad, sister, and I, looked at it for a little while before moving on and going home. I remember asking him what he thought it was, and he said he didn't know. He was curious about it, too, and we were all interested in observing it. It seemed like it was about the size of a basketball, and because it was Halloween, I didn't question it too much initially. But because there was literally nothing out there that could have caused it, it definitely made us stop and take a closer look. It was greenish and eerie. I've never seen anything quite like it before or since. It didn't move, it just sat there. Not on the ground, just above it. It was definitely eerie. I remember that the longer we sat in the truck and looked at it, the more uncomfortable I felt. I have no idea how long we sat there, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. The land around my family's property has always been very strange. I don't know how else to say it. I've had numerous creepy, bizarre, scary, weird, or unsettling experiences on this property, and they're all completely different from one another now that I think about it. I'm sure none of you are surprised by that, least of all Jeff Ritzman. They could fall into multiple categories of paranormal or supernatural experience. Demons, ghosts, fairies, poltergeists, maybe even Sasquatch, I guess. Who knows? It won't surprise you to hear that my second experience I had was also on my family's property. I live on the property again now because it's 6 acres, it's wooded, and it's easy to put my tiny house out there and be relatively inconspicuous. My folks are also in their 70s, so it's handy for me to be close. I'm 42 now, and I have lived a very unconventional life for a woman from the Midwest. I spent some time as a Buddhist monk, and I'm an artist of various media and a teacher. I've always had lots of strange and unusual paranormal experiences, but I find the older I get, and the more time I have spent meditating, the less disturbing or frightening these experiences have become. I certainly don't chase them or seek them out, but I'm also deeply fascinated by the experiences of others, far more than I am my own. One night, probably back in January, perhaps February of this year, I was listening to a podcast, I can't remember whose, but it was about the UFO phenomena and its relationship to anomalous lights. I remember thinking to myself, why don't I ever get to see anything cool like that? I've never seen a UFO. Have I? No, I don't think so. I don't remember whose podcast it was, but they were talking about the type of phenomena that often appears as a ball of light which turns into a streak of light in the sky. I definitely remember that being part of it. Anyway, I remember gathering up a few things in my parents' house, grabbing a flashlight and calling to my dog to accompany me down to the tiny house. As we casually walked down the driveway, I remember looking up and seeing a ball of white light that was just above the top of the trees. It wasn't that high up, but if I hadn't been relaxed and kind of paying attention, I might have mistaken it for being further up in the sky. It literally was there when I looked up, and the instant I saw it, it streaked off to the right and disappeared, and that was it. The whole thing felt like some kind of a joke. I've totally been there. There I was, not 5 minutes earlier, thinking it would be really cool to see a UFO, and lo and behold, I walk outside, and as soon as I look up, one happens to be right there. This time it was neither unsettling nor disturbing, creepy, or eerie. It literally felt like some kind of private joke I have with consciousness, myself, the other. I don't know. I have no idea. It felt like when you tell a friend that you really want a surprise birthday party, and you describe the kind of party that you would want, and then they whip one right up for you so quickly and perfectly that it isn't really a surprise at all. I have no idea if that makes any sense. It didn't seem like a UFO. It looked exactly like what was being described by the people in the podcast, but it was way too coincidental to feel authentic somehow. It was like somebody overheard me and brought me exactly what I wanted so I wouldn't feel left out. I remember I laughed, and that was it. I just took note of it, smiled to myself, and went about my business. It was about 11 o'clock at night, way below freezing, I feel like it was a clear sky. If I had to guess what it was, I would say size it was probably about the size of a soccer ball. From where I was standing, it seemed like it was about the size of a tennis ball because of the distance. I hope that makes sense. I estimate the height of the trees at about 30 or 40 feet tall. Although I suppose it could have been as high as 50 or 60. It's I never know how to say this word, decidus? Decidous.
Deciduous.
Thank you.
Deciduous.
Forest in east central Missouri with a lot of oak trees. So standing on the ground, the object had to be at least the size of a soccer ball or slightly larger to seem about the size of a tennis ball from my vantage point. It was just there when I lifted my eyes, and the instant I noticed it streaked off to the right, which directionally would be southwest, and that was it. So there's a lot here.
Indeed.
Who wants to go first? Josh?
Well, so the first encounter, I don't recall a lot of discussion about. There was a little bit of discussion about sort of the Earth lights ball lightning phenomena, which, if something doesn't really react to your consciousness effects, it seems like that might be a better explanation, especially when you consider the fact that the sort of smells that you might associate with fissures in the landscape, so in other words, underground gases like sulfur dioxide or possibly hydrogen sulfide, might also be in conjunction with those lights. So in other words, if someone sees a ball of light, and it's oftentimes prior to an earthquake, and they also detect this smell, someone might want to lean towards UFOs predicting an earthquake, whereas, it's actually just, some sort of tectonic, fission. But when you have something that reacts to being looked at and flying away, like the second example, yeah, that puts it into a completely different category altogether. So yeah, nothing. When she said it could be demons, fairies, or ghosts, or demon, ghosts, or fairies, I was like, why not demon, ghost, fairies?
Well, she said she's had experiences that could be classified as any of those.
Mhm.
So she has other experiences here.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that
She asked
someone who has. Well, I think it's interesting that there's someone who has had that many experiences is also experiencing, the light phenomena, which is, as you guys mentioned on previous installments, really is one of the shared core aspects of all sorts of different phenomena. I think that's not inconsequential that people who tend to be experiencers of one particular facet of the paranormal are less likely to see anomalous balls of light than people who have seen a lot of different things. At least that's been my observation over time. I don't know if Wren or Tim can vouch for that sort of observation, but I feel like when people tend to be broad spectrum receivers of paranormal phenomena, they're more likely to see light phenomena.
I'm just gonna lay this out here. But on that note, I was doing some research into flashes of light experienced during MRIs, and it seems that like in one experiment or set of data points, it was like 8 out of 1,023 surveyed people experienced seeing flashes of light or light phenomena during MRI. And what's that, like 0.8%?
Mhm.
I wonder if that correlates at all with the kind of percent of people who have these sort of experiences. Not necessarily saying that, magnetic stimulation is the cause of these, phenomena, but that maybe that number of people, maybe that's why we have a small subset of people that tend to have these experiences.
Well,
Yeah,
she didn't get a flash though. She actually saw balls of light, whereas the flash thing could totally be magnetic in some way. That's always been my thought.
And the Flash thing is much more like sort of Michael Persinger sort of ideas.
It's not just the flashing thing. It's the flashing thing is like okay, so maybe I should back up a little bit. Basically, when you see light, what that is a photon interacting with photosensitive cells in your eye, right? The eye structure chemically initiates a process by which an electric signal is sent to your brain that then interprets the visual information, translates it. Like literally what happens is that you have a protein in your eye that changes shape when it's stimulated when it interacts with a photon through isomerization. Like it changes its molecule from one arrangement to another. It no longer fits in its slot and thus initiates like this whole process. You can actually do this manually by pressing in your eyes. Like that's what, when you press in your eyes and you see all those lights and stuff, those are mechanical phosphenes. You can also create phosphenes by intense changing magnetic fields and with transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is the Persinger stuff. Basically, what you're doing is it's like the magnetic field, because all light is electromagnetic radiation. I mean, like X-rays are light. Gamma rays are light. Any kind of electromagnetic radiation is light. What we typically think of light is just radiation that's within a certain spectrum. So you see the same effect when you take like a microwave field or microwave radiation and you point it towards like an old television, like a CRT, and it makes the image go all crazy. Like that's kind of what's happening when you do transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's like the electrical currents that are transmitting this information to your brain get all screwed up and it makes it look weird. You see these flashes of light. Now, what I'm getting at here is that in recent years, there's been a lot of research into like artificial eyes and like bionic eyes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and what they do is they have like a series of photoreceptors that they implant into a blind person's eyes, and they have to have healthy retinal cells for this to work. But they basically artificially stimulate those cells and send the electrical information to the brain to generate the image. Now, when this was originally developed, I think in the 60s, they were only able to generate phosphenes, like the flashes of light or like the weird patterns you get when you press in your eyes. But there have been really like huge advances in the last couple of years where they've been able to effectively restore limited sight to blind people by effectively emulating the eye. And I guess what I'm getting at is that if you had enough control over electromagnetic radiation, like let's say you were really advanced, you had really advanced technology, or maybe you existed outside of the normal rules of time and space, and you were able to go into a human's eyeball and say, okay, send this signal here, send this signal here. You wouldn't, like the flashes of light and stuff, that's like the gross, vulgar human technological version. But if you were able to directly manipulate and send electrical currents or manipulate them in such a fine manner, like you could make people see things that weren't really there. Like full images. Like you could basically like hack someone's visual system and send them and make them see whatever you wanted them to see. So, and the process by which that would work, by which I would try to make that work, would be electromagnetism. but extremely fine control of electromagnetism that, like, we currently can't accomplish.
So what you're
But-
saying is whatever is behind this weird phenomena. Wow, that is one hell of a burst of thunder. Whatever is behind this phenomena might be, like using this type of method to make us see different things, and light is one of the common factors of it.
It could, yeah. I mean, again, this is speculation. But what I'm saying is, if you were able to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum in a very fine manner, you could hack someone's visual cortex.
And I think that's sort of I mean that's an idea that I've played around with a little bit, and I think Wren, being someone who's into video games, you'll sort of resonate with this. If you've ever tweaked, especially on a computer, texture files on a video game, and there is a texture that's not found, a certain portion of the video game level, for example, to really oversimplify it, will just appear as like a white square or like a pink square or something. And I wondered that if perhaps everything supernatural isn't really if there's a missing texture, if we don't bring something to it, it's a light. So in other words, this is sort of like the missing texture file. And I've sort of wondered if that might not be why this seems to be a cross paranormal sort of phenomena. I mean, there are stories of balls of light transforming into Bigfoot, then back into balls of light, and then into a large cat. But you'll find sort of analogs for this across all sorts of different phenomena, and I think that maybe that might have something to do with it. Again, you'll see parallels for this idea not only in something like Greg Bishop's co-creation theory, but in also certain fairy lore. I mean, it's an idea that was capitalized in the Harry Potter films of the boggart being something that had no true form except what you feared. And in fairy lore, there's actually a type of fairy that I think I've mentioned on the podcast before called just the It, which is apparently, it's got to be where, I haven't really looked into it, but it's got to be where Stephen King got his inspiration, because the It was a type of fairy creature that had no true form. It just took on your greatest fears. So I wonder if that's sort of getting along the lines of some sort of formless thing that uses sort of manipulation like you're talking about to interact with psychology or something along those lines to present something that's unsettling.
Well, let's imagine something real quick. Like, what if let's say you exist outside of, like normal human space-time, right? You're able to basically take an infinite amount of time to make a decision. So everything, or maybe near infinite amount of time. So everything appears in super slow motion to you. So when somebody starts to think about something, like if somebody thinks of a certain image, right, it creates a pattern of electrical activity in their brain. Now, if you also had the ability to manipulate electromagnetism in such a fashion that you could hack someone's visual systems like this, theoretically, you should also be able to tell what they're thinking based on examining the electrical patterns in their brain. So then you could produce an image and send that to them of what they're expecting to see before they realize that's what they're expecting to see. And there's an interesting tie-in here with one of the neurotransmitters that's important to vision is acetylcholine. And if you're familiar with different hallucinogens or psychedelics that act as cholerogenic like inhibitors that inhibit, I think, the reuptake of acetylcholine into the brain. What acetylcholine does, and maybe forgive me if anybody's a neuroscientist is listening to this. I'm not a neuroscientist. I just read papers. So it kind of controls your ability to recognize patterns based on temporal stimuli. And if you remove that neurotransmitter from the equation, you kind of like your pattern recognition goes wacky. So like, let's say someone on an overdose of diphenhydramine or Benadryl, their acetylcholine is not being transmitted in their brain properly. So what they'll see is like they'll see like maybe like somebody's stray hair like wobbling about, in their head or something because of wind. they won't be able to like associate that that's a hair, or like that pattern recognition starts to get messed up, and so it becomes a spider's leg. And because that's what they're expecting to see, like they start to have a hallucination of a spider, but it requires that like trigger. And I just wonder if sort of the co-creation stuff isn't somehow like maybe acetylcholine in someone's brain being manipulated, or like I mentioned before, like somehow something is reading what they're expecting to see based on patterns that they can somehow visualize in someone's brain, and then sending that image along.
Well, you know, it's interesting because one of those things that Jeff always likes to talk about is how perhaps if we one day crack AI, they might say, who else is here in the room with you? That sort of idea. But I wonder if the inverse isn't true. That if there's something, if the endogenous component is so tied to the experience, like you're sort of alluding to, that would never happen with something that doesn't. It's like saying, why doesn't my banana receive phone calls? Well, it's not, it's not a phone.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have those components. So why might AI not see the paranormal? They're just not wired to make that communication, to make that perception and that leap. That I think between you arguing points like that and sort of the research with DMT, I think that there is an endogenous component to the experience that I think that you're sort of getting at that's spot on.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm getting at is that something may be externally manipulating that endogenous component, like using the hardware to hack it. Kind of like, and I think the reason I think it's an external process is because multiple people have UFO experiences, right? Like multiple people see a UFO, or multiple people see an anomalous light or a cryptid or whatever. But they both could be being visually hacked by an external factor that is sending them the same information. And if it's sufficiently advanced or able to do things that we can't really comprehend, or do them at a speed that we cannot comprehend, it's entirely possible they could be, saying, okay, well, this person should be seeing this thing from this angle, and this person should be seeing it from that angle. And maybe when it's not done correctly, or there's some kind of problem with the process, that's when you get reports of people seeing two different things. One person sees an elephant, another person sees a giraffe.
Right. Yeah. No. That makes perfect sense to me.
I mean, again, speculation, but sorry, I just went off on a tangent there. If you want to go on with some more experience.
It goes back to a lot of what's talked about in sort of the in vogue subject nowadays is the human component, and I think that it's inextricable from these topics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Let's go to what I got from David. I don't know how to say his last name. We'll go with David. David W. He said, I have had these experiences, flashes overhead like somebody taking a picture. Generally, I squint and I can feel the light on my head because I'm near bald. I have also had them appear as a golden light that lit up a dim room several times. And lately, when I am driving, I will see in my peripheral vision a bright light outside my right rear door window like a guard or something protecting. I will also see blue, white, and sometimes red spots appear and disappear quickly. Not sexy podcast material, but just sending on another story. And that's kind of interesting.
That's interesting.
And one of the things I've seen in studying transcranial magnetic stimulation is that a lot of times those flashes of light will appear in the periphery of vision, off to one side.
Yeah, there's something different about the way the body or the eye processes images off in the peripheral.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember exactly what that is.
Well, I know that sometimes whenever I actually ended up talking to my optometrist about it, because I was sitting in a movie theater, and if I would flick my eyes a certain way, I would get a flash in the corner of my eye, which is, I think, that's sort of the phosphoring that you were talking about earlier, Wren, which is just something that you just naturally have, built into your eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a certain amount of visual noise that everyone has. Like, nobody has like perfect clarity. There's actually, like, if you're ever in a completely dark room that has no light sources, you'll notice this because the room isn't completely black. It looks gray, and that's like referred to as Eigenbrau, or Eigengrau, I think is the right term. And it's because with a lack of contrast or a lack of visual stimulation, you basically only get, all you really see is the noise, the kind of intrinsic background noise happening in your retina. So this is one thing, like sensory deprivation, people will have hallucinations. So sometimes your brain will try to generate activity because it doesn't like not having any kind of stimulus. This is why solitary confinement is so torturous for people. And it creates things like, have you guys ever heard of like the prisoners theater?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
It's a similar phenomenon. So like with the lack of visual stimulation, like if somebody's in a completely dark room, they have no visual stimulation, there's a weird kind of hallucination that occurs where people will start to see, balls of light or flashes of light that sometimes form into, human figures or little things dancing, or, you'll hallucinate basically. That's what it's like not the Ganzfeld experiment, but it's Ganzfeld something, like Ganzfeld image or something like that. It's basically the same thing. Like they put a person in front of a huge image that's just like one color, like one solid color, and it just messes with your eyes. Like it causes you to hallucinate because you have no contrast. This is why the night sky appears darker than a completely dark room, is because you have the contrast from the stars.
So it's a different type of, because the Ganzfeld is just a German term. I believe. So this is different than the typical Ganzfeld experiment with the ping pong balls, right?
Yeah, let me.
Although although it sounds like it's sort of having a similar effect, because you can sort of almost scry if you have the ping pong balls over your eyes.
This is, I think, where scrying comes from,
right?
Because it's like you basically have an unchanging sort of image. It's called the Ganzfeld effect, and it's from German for complete field.
Okay, then got it.
Yeah. So it's a phenomenon of perception caused by exposure to an unstructured, uniform stimulation field. And what happens is the brain starts amplifying neural noise in order to look for missing visual signals.
Yeah, it actually slips you into a theta state.
Yeah. That's what we got to remember about vision, is that we're naturally always looking for patterns. That's how our minds evolved vision-wise, right? We're always looking. This is why pareidolia is a thing. We're always looking for patterns and movement. And in a complete lack of pattern or movement or anything, our brains go crazy. It's like, hey, what's going on? I don't see anything. Is there something about to kill me? I don't know what's going on, because it's just so unnatural. And yeah, I think, and I'm not trying to necessarily say that scrying isn't like a magical thing, or I'm not trying to put it in a materialist context, but perhaps that is sort of the process by which scrying activity is kicked off. You're amplifying your brain's ability to pick up on patterns.
Well, it's like where you insert the meme of the little girl. Why can't we have both? Why can't it be? Why can't it be? A natural phenomena in your body that not only sometimes gives you completely erroneous things, but in the right context can actually give you some objective, reality, some objective kind of contact with the other world.
Yeah, it's perhaps the Ganzfeld effect is a sort of primer for that, right? Like the Ganzfeld the Ganzfeld effect is sort of like it's the gas, it's the ignition. It gets the brain firing in such a way that opens you up to information that's, paradoxical in nature.
Right.
So, Tim, do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Oh, I'm just sitting back and listening to all this science.
All right. So the next comment I have is from Ben Bishop, who's a regular contributor on Facebook, I believe, if it's the same Ben Bishop. And he says that I've seen a decent amount of light phenomena, though definitely not all that was discussed in the Strange Light Talk. One particular experience of mine encapsulates a number of similar events with lights fairly well, and I had a witness with me. I was with my then-girlfriend in the kitchen of my parents' house making something quick to eat. I saw my girlfriend swatting around the air like you would with flies or bugs, but when I looked over, I see a pin of light, like a star, in front of her as she's swatting. The strangest thing about this is that I looked directly at it and looked away without saying or thinking anything about it. I was almost completely ignoring it. Almost. because a few minutes later, I, for some reason, decided to acknowledge it and said to my girlfriend, "Did you see that pin of light?" Eyes wide, she looked totally shocked, and the color seemed to drain from her face, staring at me. I then described how this pin of light had rings of purple and reds glinting from it, though it never appeared to be one color. The center was mostly white, and there were more colors than I'd mentioned. My girlfriend, still staring at me, white, agreed that she saw the same thing. As it turned out, there were no bugs in the kitchen that we could find. She was such a staunch atheist and didn't believe in these things. I took joy in the whole event, although it was a relatively dull event. When Jeff Ritzman talks about possibly seeing lights with eyes closed, it reminded me that seeing these lights has the feeling of a third eye vision. I've had numerous third eye visions, some overlapping the physical image, and other times taking over instead of seeing the physical world. Third eye vision seems like it's literally happening at my forehead, and I don't ever recall initiating it or causing a third eye vision consciously, yet they all have a quality such that's hard to say it's a complete hallucination or imagination. I've had a number of experiences where I seem to be actively ignoring third eye vision. On one occasion, suddenly seeing a mandala of light and literally saying no as the image went away like a shade being drawn, disappearing from the top down. This particular experience really shocked me. Why would I do that? What do we know that we pretend we don't know?
I love that. I don't have time for this, and it just goes away. It's great.
So that's yeah, I mean, any fairy connections there, Josh, with the light that they were ignoring? Josh? Hello?
Yes, sorry, I've been sneezing and I was on mute. So sorry about that. I was away with the fairies. Yeah, let me crack my knuckles here because it's it's a lot to get into, I think. So obviously, I promise I'll return to the original concept of what she's talking about. But obviously fairies have long been associated with anomalous lights, rings of lights being the fairies and their dances. Pretty much anything that was seen to be an anomalous light in the British Isles would likely be called a fairy or the will-o'-the-wisp. Sometimes the will-o'-the-wisps were fairies. Sometimes the will-o'-the-wisps were pixies, which were the souls of unbaptized children who led people astray. But in terms of the specific thing of this sort of tinkle of light, what she was describing sort of reminded me a little bit of Jeff's light in the ground.
Yeah.
The light that wouldn't go away. And I was made aware of a story from I believe it was Cornwall, where some brigands, some smugglers, had just pulled up onto the shore, and they had put out all their booty, and they were resting for the evening. And they noticed, much to their surprise, in the cracks in the riverbank, there were these little lights that just wouldn't seem to dim. And once they got closer, it found out that was actually where the fairy host was. And the fairies chased them off the riverbank and back out into the ocean. Didn't follow them, but did send a rain of stones that were hot to the touch to rain down on the smuggler's ship. So I think that sometimes these lights, I think that they can be sort of warnings or perhaps signifiers that there's something deeper going on. And again, the way that she described that light seemed like it sort of was reminiscent of Jeff's buried light in the ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Except it was more in the air.
Well, right, but
Yeah.
sort of the quality of it seemed like had that sort of like starlight quality. So
Yeah, totally. Anyone else have any thoughts?
The way he talked about that sort of wiping away, how it, like it kind of wiped from top to bottom, made me think about
You're talking about the mandala thing.
yeah, the mandala, yeah. This is back to the kind of electrical stimulation of the visual cortex, but like your visual cortex is in the back of your head. This is why if you hit somebody hard enough in the back of the head, you can make them go blind. That part of the brain is damaged.
That's why you see stars as well.
Exactly, yeah, because it gets slammed. So there's a thing called the calcarine fissure, which is basically like it's kind of like what separates two portions of the brain. And what's interesting is that if you send electrical stimulation above that fissure, you'll see like kind of flashes of light or patterns of light in the lower half of your vision, and vice versa. So like as you move down, the lights will go up through your field of vision. And I don't know, it's just interesting parallel there, because it's like you could create a wiping effect by stimulating the top and then moving down to the bottom.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next of these very many comments.
Don't hog the conversation, Tim.
No, what I was going to say, what was interesting about that one and the first one, which it slipped my mind at the end there before you moved on to the second story, is how much weight do we give, and I mean this literally, like how much weight do we give people's, well, I guess not literally, but you will know what I mean when I finish. How much weight do we give people's impressions? So, in other words, the first one said she had the impression that the light was kind of there for her, right? Like that, and then this fellow's kind of has the impression that he wiped it away. So, without saying that you're just seeing things, which I don't think we're going there, and I don't think that's a place we regularly go to. How much weight do you give those impressions? I mean, to me, that was the most interesting part of the first story. The fact that she said like she felt it was there for her. What gave her that feeling?
I have been exactly there. And as a matter of fact, one of the incidents where I looked up and saw a bunch of like what looked like streaks of light that moved into weird circular openings, but the openings opened like a wipe in a movie, like where it goes in a circle around the image. They would open like that, and then the light would go into them, and then they'd close like that, and then a few seconds later, another one would open, and these things were enormous compared to the tiny streaks of light, and that happened, 4 or 5 times as I was staring up, and I was like, okay, and I looked around, and then I looked back up, and it continued, and then it just stopped happening. But I felt very much like this was a point where things were changing in my life, literally on that day. And I felt like, okay, well, that was a show just for me. And I don't know what it means, but that's what it was.
Well, I mean, to your point, Tim, so many of anomalous encounters, as you well know, do involve these sort of impressions, these sort of senses, these sort of gnosis in that original sense of knowing something.
Yeah.
And I think when you have something that is as relatively blank a slate as a light, I think that can be really an integral part of it. But having said that, I can't say that that any sort of proven anomalous light wouldn't have a similar effect of being seeming truly anomalous and special and sort of having some sort of deeper meaning. I listened to a podcast where there was a lady who actually was on an airplane when some ball lightning went down the aisle. And she said like a couple of different people actually vomited right there on the spot just from seeing this weird anomalous thing coming down the aisle. So it is sort of a toss-up, because while these sort of feelings and these sort of sensations and these sort of impressions are obviously a hallmark of something that's paranormal, I think that if it's a natural phenomena that leaves you with a natural phenomena this uncommon would also leave you with a real sense of possibly even dread or fear. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good question.
Yeah, and I mean, at some point you get to the if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it kind of point, like with the lights at Site 7 and us, it's like, was that a show for us? Or, if we set up cameras, that could see them, would they be there even when we're not there?
Right.
And it goes back to what I was talking about too. I mean,
exactly.
Maybe that's true. Maybe it is a show for you. I mean, maybe you get that sensation because something is showing it to you. Mm-hmm. You recognize that something's sending you a signal.
A nice little bit of anomalous light folklore that really didn't hear. I haven't really heard touched upon are the concept of thieves' lights. Tim, have you heard of this idea?
Sorry, I was muted. No, I haven't.
Okay. I thought you might. I didn't know if there would be a Pennsylvania analog because it was a German belief that thieves and brigands would actually use the fingers, again, from unbaptized children. There's this link with the dead that you'll find in fairy folklore, and like I said earlier with the will-o'-the-wisp, but you would actually use the fingers of unborn children to somehow, through witchcraft, create these anomalous lights, and that the beckoning and the pull of these anomalous lights to the unwary traveler would actually pull these unwary travelers into an ambush for thieves to take their belongings. And apparently in folklore, it was believed that any pregnant girl of lower class who went missing was probably taken so that the ne'er-do-wells could generate more thieves' lights.
Wow.
I mean, the whole will-o'-the-wisp thing is that, that even though the light is pointing towards buried treasure, like the idea is that the lights will lead you into, trouble. And I almost wonder if that's an attempt to sort of explain what the trouble is, rather than it actually ever being done. Because we know like things like Hands of Glory were made, like the hand of an executed person. But yeah, that almost sounds like somebody trying to like further explain, like a little tidbit about will-o'-the-wisps or something,
or reverse engineer the problem. Engineer the problem. What I find interesting is motivically this concept of the baby being taken to create a light has a resonance in not only obviously in alien lore, but also in fairy lore. Not that aliens and fairies took children to make lights, but there's that connective tissue that you'll find there.
So were the thieves in question, were they of a supernatural nature, or were they humans that were using this, otherwise natural humans using, witchery?
I think the latter. Like I said, it seems to be very localized in Germany, and I'm looking into it a little bit more. But I think it's interesting that whereas most of the time the will-o'-the-wisp legends they're not subservient to human masters. I thought that was an interesting little sort of variation, and sort of explains sort of what Ren was getting at. This idea of they're actually sort of describing the type of trouble that you'd get into if you follow these lights.
Yeah. Were there any reports of anybody actually like getting robbed, or like came back and say, yeah, I got robbed and it was because I followed these lights and it was a bunch of human robbers?
Beyond folk tales, like in an ethnographic sense, I have not found any.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm going to dig around in Pennsylvania now. I'll see if there's anything like that.
Well, I was thinking, with that part of the country, maybe that's what you were seeing on site, were thieves' lights.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's not a bad idea. You really want to rob somebody.
All right, from Carl Allen. This happened a couple of years ago. I don't remember exactly when. Every night before going to bed, I let the dogs out for a little while to their fenced-in yard that is connected to one of the front doors of our house. When I let them in, I may or may not speak to them as they come in. Sometimes I have to call out to a straggler. This night was different because for some reason I called out through the door before opening it, "Come on in." As I opened it, along with my dogs, only at eye level, there was this little there, not there, two-dimensional looking blue light flame reminiscent of a pilot light. It came in, went around the edge of the half-open door, and I lost sight of it as it zipped into the kitchen. I looked around to see if there was a light source, as this sort of looked like a reflection, which doesn't make any sense, because how does a reflection hang in midair? There was not a light source in line with where I was standing. I wasn't wearing glasses. I'm a photographer, so I'm pretty good at knowing how light behaves. This just didn't make sense. The next day I thought about it, and even though I hadn't felt threatened or scared, I realized I did not know what I had invited in. So I mentally said to whatever it was that if it did not mean well, then leave. Nothing particularly weird was going on in my house before or after this.
Fire elemental.
Fire elemental and shades of vampire lore.
True that.
Inviting it in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna go ghost dog. I think it was a ghost puppy. I don't know why. I just thought that was a really cute story. I just like how it like runs in and just kind of zips off into the kitchen.
That's why I said fire elemental. It reminded me of Howl's Moving Castle.
Oh yeah.
The little
Oh,
fire
that's
element.
yeah, that makes sense now. Yeah. No, that's an interesting one. I think it really illustrates what separates these sort of stories from things that seem to not react to yourself. This idea that there's some sort of consciousness driving this phenomena, even if it's you remote piloting it with your with your intention. There's something. The likelihood that non-guided light phenomena like ball lightning would just decide to follow you into your house after you say come on in is pushes credulity for me.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it does seem the lights are more reactive than other phenomena.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, they definitely seem to react to consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, and interact. I mean, I keep saying like that when we got actions, when we hit it with the laser, that's when what I mean. That's when it they moved around and changed color a little bit before then, but they really fired up when we hit it with the laser.
The and this one too, from the sounds of it, he did something different than he normally does, where he say he normally doesn't necessarily call them unless he has to. In this case, he called them before he opened the door.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's an
something,
interesting one. That's really neat.
Well, I mean, again, that's sort of getting back to what Jeff says. That's anti-structural. It's anti-routine. Um, now, Tim, remind me, what were the colors that you saw?
Well, they started out as a kind of white blue, and they
Okay.
were changing a little bit before we started messing with them. They would go to like a green or more like a definite blue. And then when he hit them with the laser, they would turn red. Like
Okay.
you could tell when he hit it right on because they would turn red and then they would sort of go out, like not blink out. They'd sort of kind of reduce down.
So So it's interesting. A couple of things to throw in there. It's interesting how far. I don't. Did you guys talk about how far apart red is from green and blue on the color wheel?
We did
no.
not.
Okay, so they're basically more or less the polar opposite. If you get to a really darker blue that has some more purple in it, you're a little bit closer. But they're basically on the opposite sides of the color wheel. That's the first thing. The second thing is that in fairy lore, that bluish light is generally associated. Generally, this is a very general statement, with more benevolent beings or beings that aren't aware of your presence. For example, there were blue caps that were sort of a variation on the Tommy knockers seen in a lot of mines that would actually appear solely in most cases as blue lights. Not surprisingly, because of the connotations throughout history, red lights were associated with negativity. The banshee often had red eyes. A lot of the black dogs that are associated with fairy lore, which are sort of tied up in that, often have red eyes. But also, if you saw a fairy in red, it was generally considered a bad omen. Often presaged the calamity or the death of a child. But green is obviously a fairy color as well. And generally speaking, it was sort of the color that was reserved for the fairies. So I just thought those were some interesting observations from your experience that might have some sort of significance.
Yeah, and the laser was green, so the light of the laser was green.
Well, and do you know what happens if someone, it's sort of the opposite of St. Patrick's Day tradition, where if someone isn't wearing green, you punish them. If the fairies caught you wearing green, it was actually considered an offense to the fairies. In fact, there was a series of fires in, I believe it was late 19th century Newfoundland, that were believed to have been caused by fairies because the post office there had dared to issue green stamps. So the idea was that you shouldn't wear green or red to offend the fae folk. So when you show them with a green laser pointer, that's when they usually turn red.
Yeah, that's the only time they turn red. You had to hit them with the laser pointer, then they turn red.
Well, there you go.
I can't remember what I talked about on the episode, but I did talk a little bit about light spectrum. And there was something about green lasers that I was talking about in the episode. I can't remember what it was now.
You said that they were the most dangerous, right? Because if they would hit your eye and they could actually were the ones most likely to blind you or something?
Yeah, it has something to do with the infrared. Green lasers have they produce more IR or something. And I was wondering if the green laser specifically was interacting with them in a strange way. Because I remember asking Tim if it was a green laser, and he was like, yeah, it was.
Yeah, and I have since actually I heard it before, but someone brought it to my attention. There was a couple years ago, people were talking about taking lasers out to mess with Bigfoot in the woods, and they said if you really want him to go nuts, bring a green one.
Yeah.
Okay. This next comment was from Sherry Anderson. I have a story similar in nature to the flashing lights mentioned in part 1 of the Strange Light Phenomena shows. This occurred about 25 years ago during my late teens. We live in northern Ohio, close by the Davis-Bessie power plant. My boyfriend and I were just off the main highway out in the country at a little fishing spot we visited several times before. It was already dark out, and we were sitting in the car enjoying the quiet and the river in front of us. I started getting this weird feeling of almost impending doom, like the area had a real heavy feeling or something not good being there. I started seeing these flashes out of the corner of my eye. It was like these faces just floating around all over just out of my direct vision. The longer I sat there, the spookier the feeling became, until I felt like I was itching all over. I looked at my partner and he said, "We have to go now." I looked at my partner and I said, "We have to go now." He, of course, asked why, and I said, "I don't know. We just have to leave right now," and we did. As soon as we left the area, it was like a weight had lifted off my shoulders, and I immediately felt better. I have oftentimes wondered if we just avoided a nasty incident, or if it was one of those areas that held on to past occurrences and something I tapped into. What I can tell you is that I've never been comfortable in that spot since that night.
That absolutely screams magnetic anomaly to me.
Yeah, especially with the
Everything.
itching.
Yeah, the itching, the seeing things in the periphery, the faces, the feeling of doom, like everything about that screams there was some kind of magnetic field effect going on.
The question is it coming from the power plant?
Yeah. I mean, the proximity to the power plant, I think that's super interesting as well.
And the other question was something like this. I mean, is it creating something in a sense hallucinatory, or is it allowing people to pick up on stuff because of this? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, again, too, I don't want people to think I'm reducing this to just magnetic anomalies. What I'm getting at is that something is consciously manipulating magnetic fields in such a way to produce effects in people or set up, an atmosphere in which they can communicate.
Anyone else?
I got nothing.
All right.
Great story. I love
Yes.
hearing them all.
Yeah. No, it was good. It was a very good story.
This one is from Carl Coons. He said that I have an odd flash of light story. It was early September 2005, and my now late partner was in the hospital. He went in the day before for kidney failure. He was in for his first dialysis treatment and was very upset and agitated, so the doc gave him a light sedative like a twilight dose. He was the only patient in there. Just the nurse and I stood by. He seemed to be talking to somebody for a short while. We could not understand him, though. Partway through, there was a small flash of white-blue light from behind the dialysis machine and a small popping sound, very much like a Polaroid flash cube when I was a kid, but not as bright or as loud. The nurse freaked out. She called a tech down there who found nothing wrong, and he also said that barring something really bad happening and the back panel falling off, there was nothing back there that could be a source of light and sound. My partner stopped chatting after that event, and the rest of the day was uneventful.
So they were chatting with something that wasn't there, or that they couldn't see?
He was apparently until that flash happened, and then he stopped.
That's curious.
Yeah, that's a good word for it.
I mean, I'd love to know what they saw afterwards. Did they describe it? Did they have a memory of it? Did they even know what they were doing when they were chatting? I mean, she said that they couldn't understand what they were saying, right?
Was the story that his partner died shortly after this?
Well, he just said that his now late partner.
Okay, so not late as a result of this situation.
Well, it might have been. He's not specific.
Okay.
It just says, and this was early September 2005, and my now late partner was in the hospital for kidney failure. So I'm guessing it was from this eventually.
Mm-hmm. But not specifically the incident. Didn't see the flash of light and then, the next day is gone or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting. Did they make it sound like they were like talking in tongues or something? Like it was like glossolalia?
I read you exactly what he said. He sounds like he was just mumbling.
He said he couldn't understand it, but
Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
because he was mumbling, or was it because he was speaking in a way he couldn't understand?
He seemed to be talking to somebody for a short while. We could not understand him, though. So I'm guessing he was mumbling. You know, if he's on a small dose of sedative, he was probably mumbling.
Yeah. That's
Still,
interesting.
that's very interesting.
Okay, so this one is specifically to eye shine, and this is from Wright B. Hinja. He said, okay, so he sent a message via YouTube, but there was too much of a limit. He said, I'm sitting here with my mind racing, going back to my experience. About 25 minutes into the show, there's talk about eye shine that's difficult to see unless you pay attention. I'm Norwegian, but raised in the U.S. since I was about 4. I moved back to Norway in 2000 to live with my family that moved back in the mid-90s. I had gone through a divorce and had to move temporarily back with my mother and where my 2 younger brothers and sister lived. The paranormal and my family go hand in hand, except for me. I hardly ever get to experience anything. This is why it's so burned into my mind. We live in an apartment complex, which is very typical of Norway. There's some woodland around us, especially in the middle of the apartment complex. A lot has now been removed for some reason, perhaps to make it look nicer. One evening, my brother and his friend were out with their dogs, as they usually do. It was autumn, so night came quicker. It was about 7 p.m. and almost dark when my brother and his friend Tommy stopped for a minute down the street from us where the road meets a gravel road that leads to a bus stop. On the right-hand side is the woodland that is in the middle of our apartment complex. They're standing there, and my brother notices something in the apartment's backyard, which could be seen from the road. Numerous eyes, about the size of your fist, if not larger, were visible. My brother got Tommy to take a look to see if he could see it too, and sure enough, he could. When they saw one pair of eyes rise, like whatever it belonged to was crouching and then standing up, they decided to come on home. Strangely, the dogs didn't seem to notice anything. Fast forward 2 or 3 days, and around the same time, my brother comes running into my room exclaiming that they're back. Confused, I asked what when they said the eyes. This time, however, it was by what we call the garbage house, a large shed with garbage bins for our apartments to use. The woods behind this garbage house are gone now, but there used to be woods that you could go into from behind the garbage house all the way back to where my brother and Tommy first saw the eyes. Well, I come out and I take a look. I honestly couldn't see anything. My brother, in half-frustrated voice, exclaims, "Look, dude, there." I followed his pointer, which points between 2 trees. I do notice something, but it's very hard to see, and the more I concentrate, the more I'm able to see what they're talking about. 2 very pretty saucer-shaped eyes that were a baby blue whitish color were staring back at us. I'm extremely intrigued, and I can't get my eyes off of them, and I wonder to myself, what is that? I almost thought I was seeing things, but remembered my brother and Tommy brought me out here in the first place. I thought lights from the neighbors. Nope, it was just relatively thick woods back there, and the ground went slowly upward, so behind these eyes were dirt and grass. I stand there looking for what it felt like ages when I ask my brother to run in and get my DSLR. He comes out with it, but not my lens, so I go back and I get my kit lens as the only other lens I had. He comes back out, I snap the lens on my camera and I turn it on. I focus to where I see the eyes, which I could see through the viewfinder, albeit more difficultly. And I take a few snaps on automatic mode with flash, thinking that maybe the flash would drown out the eyes. I take a few without flash. We continue to stand there, all 3 of us looking, until I decide that I've had enough. I was too curious to see what I had on film, so I came inside, start up the aperture, and import the files. But what I saw next left me with more questions than anything else. Every single picture, about 10 in total, were almost completely dark, except for 3 or 4 feet from the ground. It's like someone took their hand over the top portion of the lens to block out the view. We ran back outside to grab more pictures, but the eyes were gone. I was stupid enough to eventually delete these images. It's just the story that was told in the episode matches the thing I experienced so much that it caused my heart to race and have to send you this.
Yeah, especially when he's talking about the standing up, as that's what the fellow Jeff that was with me at Site 7. That's the way he described it, and
Right.
and while I don't think they were eye shine there, that is what it appeared like. It like that was like the speed and the amount of movement. It looked like something very big was standing up.
Well, I mean, and if you look at the sort of light phenomena in general, it seems to be really a microcosm of the UFO phenomena. How many times have you heard about UFOs or lights in the sky that are UFOs changing shape, splitting into different pieces? You know, so it makes me wonder if something can't go, oh, we should probably split up here, and then it's two, light balls hovering simultaneously. So just because it did the same thing but was only a single ball of light for Tim's experience doesn't mean it's not a similar phenomena being seen in this account.
Right. Yeah.
Anything, Ren?
Just thinking about the photograph a lot.
Yeah.
That's interesting how it was like blocked out. I mean, it was a DSLR, so it had. I mean, I've worked with DSLRs, and they have the ability to take a long exposure. I wonder what it would have looked like if there had been a long exposure taken, which
Yeah.
is something I want you to do, Tim, as well, if you can get your hands on DSLR.
And I think I suggested that too, didn't I, Tim?
I believe you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
do some long exposures.
One of the strange familiars patrons suggested that I set up an Amazon list with equipment I need. So I'm going to do that. I don't really expect anyone to go ahead and gift me that stuff, but
won't hurt.
Hey,
Yeah.
I've got a DSLR. I can come out if you'll take me out there.
I'll take you out there.
I'll come out. We can use mine.
Leaves
All
are
right.
coming. I don't think I haven't been. I mean, I've been out there all times a year now, but I only saw the lights when the leaves were off the trees. So
Okay.
Well, if Ren's going to come out, I'll come out as well. We'll make a day of it.
yes.
All right. So was that one? There was actually someone who sent me an interesting photograph, and I don't know what to make of it. Doesn't have to do with this stuff, but it just him talking about the photo being cut off. They have they have cameras around their house, and one of the images that it took of their bedroom literally looked like a ball of clouds in front of the camera, and almost like a human shadow shape in the corner. But that could just be pareidolia or whatever.
Is this the same person that there was a person a while back you were sharing photos with me, like almost real time? They were sharing them with you, and you were kind of showing them to me. Is this the same person?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, they decided they didn't want to talk about that anymore. So
That's right. Even at the time, they were pretty nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was very it looks like you're looking into a thick cloud bank. And I asked them to send me a picture of what it normally looks like, and of course you just see their bed and everything else normally, and I'm like, I have no idea what would cause a camera to do that.
Yeah, that's pretty weird. I mean, humidity maybe, but otherwise, I don't know.
It's really it's a really distinct bank of clouds. That's the thing. You can see like pearls and everything else. It doesn't look like it's something in the lens. It looks like there's something in front of the lens.
That's spooky.
So
Air elemental.
there we go. So there was that one. That one. Which way was I going here? Okay. So this
I'm
one.
going to be the elemental guy from now on instead of the demon guy.
Speaking my language.
So this one comes from Vern. And he says, this is from Mackenzie County, North Dakota, October 1986. I fell asleep on the couch, but was awakened by bright flashes of light coming from the east windows, lighting up the inside of the room. Sitting up, I tried to see what was going on. Almost immediately, I was blinded by a strobe light, an extremely white flashbulb-like light that lit up the entire room. I thought it was lightning, but lightning thunder isn't normal for us in October. Then it started again. It definitely wasn't lightning. It seemed to be directed at me. I couldn't tell if it was close or a quarter mile away. I watched this for at least a half an hour. It would strobe a few times and then go dark for 5 minutes or so and then start again. There was no wind or sound, and it seemed darker than normal. I don't know how to explain it better than that. That's when I got scared. It was a fear that I never want to feel again. I knew there was something in the house. What was really strange is that I sensed that whatever it was knew that I knew it was there. I felt as if I was being observed. I actually thought I was going to be eaten. I know that sounds weird and overly dramatic. I remember trying to stay still and make myself small. I guess I finally just drifted off to sleep. That was the first of several flashing light nights my wife and I experienced over the fall and winter of 86 and 87. There were other lights, too. On the small hill behind the house, I saw fairy lights swirling around and dancing. Once or twice, we saw flashes of light during the day. That left us wondering if we were having electrical problems, so we called in an electrician to check out the wiring inside and out. He didn't find anything. One night, as my wife tells it, she came suddenly awake and aware that something was in the bedroom. She describes it as a small buzzing, zapping, floating television screen in the corner above the bed. She tried to wake me but couldn't. She screamed and it swooshed out of the room. One evening, while visiting a couple in town, we were telling our stories and the woman got a strange look on her face and shared a newspaper article in the Bismarck Tribune about some rural Bismarck people seeing flashing lights during that same time period that unsettled us. Another time, a neighbor stopped by and we were asking him if he'd seen any lights, telling him what we were seeing. He told us a story about how the old-timers told a tale about a woman that wandered the prairie swinging her lantern. I should mention, before I close this, that the farmstead is pretty remote, 12 miles from a town of only 100, with our nearest neighbor 3 miles as the crow flies. There are no streetlights, cell towers, etc.
Wow. That sounds like UFO stuff.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it made me think of. Is there's so many connections here to what people encounter in abduction accounts with the weird lights, the buzzing, the things in the house.
Yeah, feeling like somebody's there. Unfortunately I know that feeling. I hate it.
Yeah, that first story reminds me a lot. I mean, that's why I didn't think it sounded the whole. He thought he was being dramatic, thinking something was going to eat him, but that's not dramatic at all. I mean, I know that feeling too. Like, that reminds me a lot of sleep paralysis experiences I've had, where, I've seen lights during sleep paralysis, and I've also had the impression that, something was coming to get me and that it was going to eat me, and that it knew that I knew that it was there. But they didn't sound like they were paralyzed. That's what's interesting to that story. Like it was almost like a hypnagogic kind of state they were in, how they just kind of went back to sleep. But it completely lacked the paralysis aspect, which is kind of strange.
But the back to sleep thing is not uncommon either. We've talked about that on the show too. Like this horribly strange things happen, and then people go, "Okay, well that was interesting. I'm going back to sleep now."
Yeah, happens in Bigfoot, happens in alien encounters, happens in UFO sightings, happens in all sorts of things.
Yeah, likewise happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that note of the lady walking along the prairie, swinging her lantern.
Yeah, that's a great image, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't there a fairy thing like that? Like some guy who walks along carrying a lantern in the night?
Something? There's like everything for that. I mean, there's, for example, there's I know on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, there's the legend that there's an old man who walks the shores of the shoreline in hurricanes with his lantern, to keep ships away from the shoreline. It's like a motif that you'll find along railroad tracks and along highways and stuff, about often decapitated people, but sort of like a warning, or sort of some sort of specter that has a lantern, and that's the explanation for the anomalous lights. I sort of stepped on you there, Tim.
Oh, it's just the Norse Germanic equivalent of the leprechaun, and I forget exactly what they call it. But that's essentially just a guy carrying a lantern around for nefarious purposes, like all these other light stories. I think he's trying to lead you, lead you into the woods or something.
Tim schooled me. Thanks, man.
All right, so I think we have time for one more, and we still have as many that we've gone over today. I think we have even more we haven't gotten to yet, so we're going to have to do another part.
Wow, that's awesome.
Or two. And, of course, people should feel free to continue sending these stories if they have them, and we'll just keep going talking about them, because they're very interesting, and like I said, they don't get a lot of attention. So this guy says, oh, apparently he knows you. Jerry Drake, Tim.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Now I'm looking to see. I clicked it.
I just recorded an interview with Jerry. We'll have him on upcoming.
That's what he says. So I'm going to leave this one for now. We're going to go to a different one. A simple one here. Someone who made the comment: Trevor James Constable was photographing plasma critters in either the ultraviolet or infrared spectrum, which parallels Andrew Collins' light anomaly book, and that's always interested me.
Well, the work of Trevor James Constable's interesting anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was thinking of with the infrared light. You just triggered that memory. The Seattle Demon House guy
Yeah,
had said
That's right.
that the infrared light somehow hurt
Mhm.
the entities, that they didn't like it for some reason, and that's why our cameras weren't able to pick them up. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that was it wasn't the guy from the house; it was the guy who researched the house from the English guy whose name it's escaping me now. But they heard it the thing something said it in one of the camera mics.
Yeah.
They don't like those cameras. They don't like that light. So we'll go with Gene McCarthy. I have a photo of one of the lights knocking me off the arm of my sofa all the way over to the other side. My daughter just happened to catch it on her phone. Whatever it was, it used to do it a lot, but never in a way that hurt me. Then we had a very bright, smaller lights moving really fast, and people simultaneously saw them. Amazing streaks of light caught on camera. The whole top of a huge oak tree lit up like daylight with no light source, and moving orange balls with trails behind them. The stuff is always here. I keep a lot of holy water and pray a lot. So much has gone into this house, and it comes and goes. Thank God I've never seen any apparitions, but others have. There is hair pulling, footsteps, and voices. My hallway is the focal point. It is just a part of my life, so we do not make a big deal, but yes, the lights are definitely sentient. I do not think I have too many pictures without at least one in a photo or going around corners. It's not frightening or hurtful, it just is.
The hallway is interesting there. And didn't the Seattle Demon House guy also say the hallway was the focal point of a lot of activity there?
And I believe Jeff's encounters often happen in his hallway.
In the hallway, yeah.
Well,
it's all also cool. Like, okay, so we had one that sounds like UFO. We had one that's eye shine, and this one sounds like it's tied to like ghostly or haunting phenomena.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, hallway. I mean, everybody say it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Liminal space. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
There we go.
Well, the light thing too. I mean, being associated with like the light in the tree kind of reminded me of that recent story on another podcast where this guy got lost in the woods, led to the woods, and then came to this farmhouse where there was bright light. You know, kind of like up in the trees, like shining light down on this like farmhouse or barn or something. It's just interesting how, I don't know, it's like spotlights. It's like I just keep thinking it's like a spotlight shining down on something.
Yeah.
And I've taken there's a town near here called Seven Valleys, and I've taken so many reports from there of fields being lit up. Like the field itself is just lit up, like the ground's lit up, and it's green or gold. People will describe it as. And just multiple people who do not know each other have come to me and told me these stories. Also, lights in the sky that shoot down to the ground there as well. But the lit up fields is just really, really interesting. I mean, I don't, what's that?
Yeah. And, the physicality of her experience I thought was interesting too. Like it knocked her off the arm of the chair or something.
Mm-hmm. Or
Yeah.
pushed her across the couch, I think.
Yeah, pushed her across the couch. Like that is something that, my previous thing about visual hacking, I mean, that's way far and beyond that, because it's like not something that's just visual. That's something that's actually physically exerting force on the environment around you.
But
it knocked her off the arm of the sofa all the way to the other side of it.
Wow.
If I recall correctly, there is an account somewhere out there of someone getting close to one of the Brown Mountain lights and touching it and getting knocked on their hiney.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Just by some sort of explosive force. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like there's like the photo, I forget what the effect is called, but like light can exert pressure, but not like that. Like, I mean, that's like tons of joules of force to do something like that. That's not something that light can really do.
But an electromagnetic force could.
Possibly, yeah. But what is it what is it repelling? Like, is it sort of an electric? It almost seems like if it was an electrical arc or something that was strong enough to knock you down,
It would hurt.
It would burn. Yeah, it would hurt you.
Yeah.
It'd burn you. It'd cause you to have a heart attack. Like, it would do more than just push you down. That's what's very. It's almost like it's a very controlled exertion of force.
All right. Let's see if I have another really short one. This was someone who threw out a possibility which is not totally different from, I think, what Wren is saying. On the whiteouts, as in blackouts, perhaps a buzzkill, but considering a muscle spasm in the iris causing a moment of dilation and a flash. When it happened to me, I rationalize it as such. And that's certainly possible. I mean, that's kind of what Joshua was talking about in the theater. You know, looking and getting a flash.
Right. Or what Ren's talking about too.
Yeah.
So is he saying that, like, your iris dilates like quickly and causes a flash?
Yeah. Like it's a muscle spasm in the iris causing a moment of dilation, which then, resolves as in your vision as a flash.
Maybe. I mean, it's an interesting theory. I just don't know if even fully dilated, you'd have that dramatic of a flash. Like, I know we've probably all had our eyes dilated before, and even though it does make everything quite bright, I don't know. Maybe quickly, you'd have to, like, somehow. I'm sure there'd be a way to actually test that, but that's an interesting idea.
With the flashes, are there accounts of multiple people seeing the flash at the same time?
Well, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
That would kind of eliminate that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's, with things like this, like with any of this stuff, I think there's multiple explanations.
Oh, sure, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I'm sure sometimes that's probably the case. What he's saying, yeah,
yeah, just little eye things, and I've always felt like when I saw the weird light anomaly behind my house and the flashes were happening like constantly as opposed to just like one or two, and I watched the moon pull through the clouds, and I knew that wasn't actually happening, but I didn't seem to be hallucinating. I didn't seem. I mean, obviously there was something going on in my brain that was not normal, but I figured that something like it was some kind of electromagnetic effect. You know what I mean?
Were you wearing an infinity gauntlet when the moon pulled through the cloud?
I don't know what that means.
That means spoiler alert.
And like the lights and the light in the field are one thing. It was looking up at the moon and watching it kind of pop through the clouds and shake. That was like, and I just kind of went, well, that can't be happening. And I'd look away and look back and it would look normal. And then it would pop through the clouds again. And I could see the moon in detail, even though the clouds were covering it. So it was a very strange incident. But I eventually, went with whatever was causing the light was probably also affecting my brain on some level. And hence also the flashes of light.
And that kind of gets back to like my question for Wren, and I mean I'm totally willing to play with this theory, and I think a lot of these theories that's what we do. We play with them and see, like, is this a possible explanation? But in this scenario where there's something that's so able to control, like to hack our eyes for shorthand, are they hacking everyone's eyes the same? So for instance, I was out there with two other guys who were, we're all seeing the same thing. In that instance, if that's the case, are they hacking all of our eyes the same way? I mean, does that account for that?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. If something is able to, I don't know, perceive time in such a fashion, like so quickly that they're able to effectively read your mind by examining the patterns in your brain, it's also possible that they could they could make the calculations on the fly and say, okay, well, Tim's seeing, the light from this angle, and Jim is seeing the light from this angle, and Bob is seeing it from this other angle. And, it could do all that. If it, again, this is just a hypothesis, but it's like, like if we're going to play with that idea and this, whatever it is able to kind of think and move quicker than we can possibly imagine, there's no reason why it couldn't also figure out how to send the signal to multiple recipients and modulate that signal in such a way that each person sees what it wants it to see.
Wouldn't it be easier just to send a light?
Well, I'm wondering if it's only able to. I mean, that's the other thing too. It could just be a light.
But no, I get what you mean. Yeah,
in some cases, I'm thinking more of like more complex scenarios.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a really interesting thought.
All right. Well, we are just about out of time for this episode, so we'll do another follow-up. And again, You can send your comments or stories to, either stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com or contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Or, if you're listening on YouTube, feel free to leave a YouTube comment. There's so many ways to get in touch with me. And we will talk about them in a future episode. Like I said, I still have a whole list here of things that people have commented on that we need to go over. But real quick, Tim, where can people find you?
Strangefamiliars.com. That's for my podcast, Strange Familiars, but all the contact info goes right there for me. So you'll get me no matter what.
Josh?
You can find my website at joshuacutchin.com, and that's a hub for everything, including my my book that's coming out at the end of the summer. Very soon, both Tim and I will be featured in the 3rd volume of Wood Knocks,
Nice.
which I don't believe that there is a release date for that yet. Is there, Tim?
No, it's coming soon, though.
Okay.
And Wren?
So keep an eye out.
You can find me at liminalroom.com or on my Twitter account at Mr. MISTER _ APOL, APOL. And if you're a neuroscientist or someone who specializes in vision, feel free to hit me up on Twitter and tell me how wrong I was about everything I said on the show.
And then we'll also talk about that in the future if that's the case.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, guys.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
And a special thanks to our Patreons who are donating at the $10 or above level. Christopher Sheehan, Mark Brady, Allison Cook, Christopher Vaughn, Robert Groom, Chris Elmquist, Scott Morris Everett, Super Inframan, Patricia Giaquinta, Lauren Melton, John Eddy, Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, and Carla Mahoney. Thank you all so very much. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.